So last time when I was posting about breath work and mindfulness, I was going to make it a double episode to post about anti-Semitism and censorship at the same time. Then I decided to make them separate episodes because I wanted to kind of ramble for a long time about the other topic. And just maybe for ease of people's listening. So I did kind of introduce the topic in the previous episode, but I didn't really go that route as far as the recording. I just figured I'll just post two separate episodes. So that breath work and mindfulness episode I'm posting on September 10th at 11:59 p.m. And then this current episode I'll post at on the 11th at midnight. So it'll technically be the 11th. So basically I'm doing that so that I can have posts on 2 days, but it'll be just like 1 minute apart when they actually are scheduled to be released. Now I'm worried about opening up this topic. I'm mainly worried because of some recent experiences that were negative as far as two of my other podcasts. One of them, I got content completely, like my whole YouTube channel got shut down. I'll talk about that. And then the other one, I'm in a warning mode for one episode. And to me, I feel like it's to be honest, it's kind of BS, but whatever. I'm just frustrated with YouTube right now, and this is the space that I'm going to use to talk about it. But I have noticed with anti-Semitism, which is, I guess, a type of prejudice, hatred towards Semitic peoples, kind of along the categories of racism. I'm noticing how this type of racial injustice, that is anti-Semitism, I'm noticing how it's being treated differently than other types of racial issues. And that's kind of something that I wanted to touch on. Now, I just want to say, full disclosure, I do not promote hatred. I'm not trying to get people to hate people. So anybody who is going to try to say that that's what I'm trying to say, that is not what I'm trying to say. I mean, why would I have had a whole entire podcast about, my passion for, Jewish traditional writings and things like that I've been definitely indulging in and, consuming and learning for decades at this point, and have had an interest in it for decades at this point. I'm not trying to bash Jewish populations or Arab populations or anything like that. That's not my intention. My intention is to talk about it in an open-minded way. There's maybe some gray area, and then there's maybe some definite concerning racism and prejudice, and then there's all the way on the other side of the spectrum that's complete love and peace and compassion. And I don't hate Jewish people. I don't hate Arab people. I don't think I hate anybody. There are probably a couple people in my life that I find very challenging to be around. Off the top of my head, maybe 3 people, and their family members, and they're abusive people, or at least have a history of abuse. And those people, for the most part, are the ones I have issues with. None of them are Jewish. I just do what I need to do for myself as far as limiting my interactions with them, and I don't really engage or share with them or allow them to be involved in my life. I'm cordial, I'm respectful, I'm nice, but I don't go out of my way to be genuinely revealing authentic information with them or anything. I just can't really, I don't know. I think they're kind of on a level where it's like their maybe lack of authenticity or complications with vulnerability make it so that I'm not comfortable talking to them because they respond in a very sarcastic and negative and abusive way, and I don't see how, I get value out of that. It actually is damaging to me, so I try to not really engage with those people if I don't have to. Because I don't want to give them fuel to kind of work with. Yeah, they're just in a bad space, and they have been all of my life. They're older than me, and I'd rather just leave it where it is. So just keep that in mind. If I do say anything that sounds off the wall, sometimes I have a difficult time explaining what I'm trying to say, what I'm thinking, and explaining what I'm trying to say. But I am by no means promoting any type of hatred towards Jewish people or any people of any kind. I'm not promoting hatred. I'm not promoting it. I'm not promoting it. I'm condemning it. I'm not condoning it. But I do want to talk about it from multiple angles for a very long time. I don't want to, I just don't want it to come across like I'm saying, everybody needs to go out and be hateful. That's not, why would I say that? That's stupid. I don't believe in that. Okay, so where to start? I'm kind of freestyling this. So I guess I'll start with the YouTube stuff, and then I'll go into my own kind of, I'll play off of those topics and kind of expand it out into talking about just generally in society, kind of what's being brought to the surface in my world. This is my personal experience. I'm not saying everybody feels this way or should feel this way or needs to listen to me. If you don't want to hear this topic, by all means, turn it off, please. Turn it off. I'm not trying to say offensive things, so don't go trying to report that I said something, because I'm not going to promote hate. And when I do, accidentally say something that I'm like, ooh, that was kind of maybe, could have been taken the wrong way. I've literally taken down episodes where I'm like, maybe I was venting about a situation with a friend that was maybe raw or something still at the time, and I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be posting that on the internet. That's between me and this other person, and it's wrong of me to just be like, I'm pissed about this thing, and trying to use a platform to kind of, express that, because everybody has their own perspectives, and it's fine. Now, with YouTube, the frustration that is YouTube. So, have you dabbled in YouTube content creation? Have you? Now, excuse me. Now, if you have never, I feel like people who either don't know content creators or are not content creators have a different relationship with content than people who post stuff. So the people who never post, they consume, never post anything. They don't post on, well, they might post on social media like Facebook or Instagram or something, just like little comments or something, but they're not necessarily like creating content that they're gonna post, like long form or short form video or audio content or blogging or anything. They're not putting their ideas out there in more than just like maybe like a Facebook rant, which is usually just to whoever follows you. Instagram is a little more widespread. TikTok is also a little more widespread. Like, I guess what I mean by that is they're they are putting content in front of people that they didn't look for. I feel like Facebook is basically you decide who you want to see content from, who you're connected with, and when you go on Facebook, you're basically connected with the people that you're already connected with. Whoever has added you and you've added them, you're kind of in a bubble of people and their posts. So you can basically scroll your wall or any main section and see what other people have posts pretty much by day. Or you can click on people who you already have in your network and see what they specifically have posted over time. X or Twitter definitely is more widespread. It recommends stuff to you that you would maybe never have ever thought to click on or look at. Now you are able to add people and whose content you want to follow, but it doesn't matter. Like, there's still going to be posts that come your way even if you've never opted in to really hearing from those people. It's just kind of categories that might be of interest to you. TikTok is the same way. Instagram is, I don't know if is Instagram the same way. Do you have to have added somebody on Instagram to actually, like, when you start scrolling Instagram, is it all only people you've added? That's what I can't remember. And I don't want to look at it right now because I'll get distracted. Rumble kind of reminds me of like the old search engines. Like, remember when we used to have, like, I don't remember the names, like Hotbot and Netscape and Lycos. I think I used to use Lycos because it was like a dog. They had like a dog. I don't know what the heck. But it's kind of like, it feels like an older style search engine. It's not as powerful and like on point as YouTube, but it's kind of the same general idea, but it's less censored than YouTube, which I definitely appreciate. So X and Rumble are a lot less censored. Just with Rumble, it's harder to find what you're looking for. You can search something, and if you spell it wrong, or if it's not like exactly, on point, it just doesn't capture exactly what you're looking for sometimes. It's not very powerful as far as search, but it's powerful as far as open-mindedness of ideas and not getting censored and things getting warnings and shut down and channels getting deleted and stuff like YouTube does. Now, YouTube is crazy. It's pretty much Google's, I don't know if it's more popular than Google's main, internet search, but it's a very powerful search engine. Now, what YouTube is doing lately that I've noticed this since the Rona. Since the Rona, I think that's when I first realized, they're not letting people post about certain things. That's why we started saying the Rona in different kind of words. And there's also other terms, that you can't really post about. And so a lot of people get around these types of posts by putting terms that other people recognize what they're talking about, but it doesn't really tip off the algorithm. So you can say something like the Rona, or say something like the pandy, or something like that, and people don't know they do know what you're talking about, but for some reason the algorithm isn't really triggered. It doesn't get triggered to like delete or check on what that is, because I didn't post the name of the virus or whatever it is I'm talking about medically or whatever. So you can kind of get around it. And there's multiple topics like that in the mental health field, in the physical health field, and racially and sexuality related and gender identity related. There are a lot of topics that are like that if you cannot post, if you don't post those titles or talk about those words specifically, your content will get a little more recognized. Now, as a person who has posted a lot of content on YouTube about LGBT topics, about cannabis topics, about gender identity topics, you start getting flagged all over the place. But why? And why? This is a form of censorship. And the reason why I think it's so weird, something happened the other day. So it was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. I had a YouTube channel that was dedicated to posting, okay, let me back up one second before I go into that. Now, I've noticed people who are certain races, certain minority races, certain sexuality categories or gender identity categories, if you are posting, your content is less likely to get recommended or even monetized compared to maybe a Caucasian person, compared to a straight hetero person, compared to a cisgender person. This is just facts. If you post on YouTube, and the same thing almost happens with job applications. There was this guy who did job applications using like foreign sounding names that don't sound American, and he made some posts using foreign sounding names, and he applied for jobs using names that sounded Asian or whatever, or female, and then he applied for jobs using names that sounded Caucasian and male. And the Caucasian male applications, all the other information was the same. All the qualifications, the times at the school, the times at a job, all the other everything was the same, just the name. The name was a different name. And it was a different gender, potentially different racial backgrounds. And he found that the Caucasian male names got more hits, basically, as far as like landing an interview. I don't know if that was through LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn, the issue I have with LinkedIn is you have to have your picture, so that kind of gives you away racially, and I'm pretty sure there's an algorithm that's screwing with that too. But I guess my main issue is the censorship with algorithms. That's gonna become a problem, you guys, and I'm starting to notice it more with topics related to anti-Semitism. Now, again, I'm not saying be racist against Jewish people. I'm not saying do that. I would never say to do that. I would never say to be racist against someone else. But basically, there's racism baked into the algorithm, right? Especially with YouTube. Now, I'm a black female, QPOC person, you know. If I were a cis white male, straight cis white male, my content would do better. It's just a fact. Look it up. I'm not making this stuff up. I've been online long enough and talked to enough variety of people and seen the research behind it. Now, that is kind of an overarching problem that I don't think I can address immediately right now, but it's an issue that any content creator has to work around. And so that's just something, this is the longest introduction, 23 minutes, that is kind of the introductory information I'm working with. We already know that the algorithm promotes racism. They do, especially on YouTube. It promotes racism. I've had content that I've followed on YouTube by certain creators where their content is on there, but if you type in the name of their channel, it doesn't come up at all. If you type in the name of the episode, it doesn't come up at all. But if you go to their Instagram, click on their YouTube link, it links to their YouTube channel from Instagram, and you just have full access to all of their YouTube information. So why can't I search it on YouTube? Why can't I find them through YouTube? If I search them, I can't find them. If I even search the exact title of the video, it doesn't come up. So they're blocked from the search, right? And what are these people? They're LGBT content creators of ethnic minority groups. They're not saying anything. It's like relationship advice and stuff. They're not saying anything that any, cis hetero content creators, they're not saying anything that they don't post. Same thing. It can be the same topics about, relationships, intimacy, different kind of things. But just because these people are talking from an LGBT perspective, they do not get the ability for people to search for that. Now, is that fair? It's one thing if it's like okay, maybe if they're not getting recommended, but if you literally can't search it, you can't even search it without going to the link on their Instagram. There's a whole different platform, and clicking on that link, you have to have a direct link to get to their YouTube channel. And it's not in private. It's not, you can only access this with the link. It's not set up like that. Basically, YouTube is censoring their content. The more provocative and the more controversial type of content you follow, you'll recognize that this is a thing. And I know people might think I'm lying, but I'm not lying. Like, I have no reason why I would lie. I'm actually frustrated with it, because it's not fair. And the people who are running these sites are making decisions about what we can even search or not, So just keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when I'm talking about all these other topics. I know, this might not seem directly related, but it is related because, if you can't search certain stuff because YouTube has decided you can't search for this channel, YouTube has decided you can't search for this topic by these people, but you can access their link. If you find their link somewhere else on the internet, then it will still go back to YouTube and you can watch their stuff. And they're deciding which people this happens for. Now, even with promotions, with like brands who offer sponsoring videos, I've heard a lot of Black and African American content creators talking to Caucasian content creators and noticing that they get a different rate offered to them for sponsorships, a much lower rate. The Black populations are getting a much lower rate offered for sponsorships, like thousands of dollars differences, for the same thing, right? Even if they have a following that's similar in size, not like significantly lower. Another thing that's not fair, Now this isn't all. I'm not saying all Black content creators are getting all offered lower rates than all white people. It's not all, but enough. I've heard it enough times that it's obvious that it does happen. And if people aren't talking to each other, they're not going to know. But I don't know. This is like some kind of corruption. This is not equality. You have brands and algorithms determining what people are going to be able to get paid or be able to monetize or be able to post just based on who they are, how they look, what they were born like, Now this is the early phases of this, guys. We're in 2024. Now, with everything that's being brought up with AI and people wanting to automate everything and make everything less and less hands-on and more automatic and more passive, there's going to be more and more algorithms baked in to everything. And if they're already racist and prejudiced now, how's that going to affect things coming up? I mean, what do you guys think is going to happen? You've got platforms that everybody uses to search for everything that are determining what you're even allowed to search, what you're even allowed to see or hear or listen to. Now, I'm not even talking about minors. I'm not talking about people under 18. and all that. It's a whole topic that I don't want to add that variable to this episode. I'm talking about adults who are consenting adults who want to search something, and we're realizing already with the research and just the data from content being posted that it's not equal. Now, let me talk about what happened with my YouTube stuff. For years, so pre 2020, I was posting reviews of cannabis products. I was never illegally consuming them for anything that I reviewed. I wasn't driving around town under the influence. I wasn't, I live in California. I can legally buy it. And I was posting reviews on YouTube for years, like almost 5 years or so. Posting reviews, all the time. And then I stopped for a really long time. And because I basically, now if I'm buying stuff, it's kind of the same products, and I don't really venture out as much as I used to. But I was posting before cannabis was legal, recreationally legal. I was posting when it was still medical only, and I had a medical card, so I was able to legally buy and consume and talk about it. I wasn't recommending doing any kind of illegal thing. I was just talking about, okay, how is this one different from that one? How much did it cost? How long did it last? What were the effects? Was it an edible? Was it a drink? What was it? Years, guys, years on end, I was posting reviews and posting them to YouTube. No problem. For years. I was posting it for educational purposes for years. Now, you guys remember when I said, maybe you remember when I said that I'm starting to sync my RSS feed to YouTube from Spotify. So it took me a few days to kind of figure out, not a few days, but maybe hours over a few days. I wasn't like sitting there for 3 whole days, like in front of the computer trying to figure things out. But basically, I had an issue uploading RSS feed from Spotify's podcast to YouTube. I didn't want to do it manually because I've had hundreds of episodes. So this podcast, I have, at this very moment, everything's private on YouTube. But it is on YouTube, and I haven't yet pushed the button to make it all public. But I think it only uploads 104 or 105 episodes per day, and I had hundreds of episodes, so it took multiple days to upload for Theory and Theology. Now, Theory and Theology didn't have an old YouTube channel. It's a new YouTube channel that I opened just to post. This other podcast about cannabis products, reviewing them and education about it, it had been up for years. With me posting various pieces of content about different types of products I tried. Now I went to, that same, I guess you'd call it a brand, that same brand had a podcast as well on Spotify for podcasters. On Spotify. And I would post through Spotify for podcasters. Now, I've been posting on there for years as well, since like 2020 or so. And posted on there for years. Had content for years, on the podcast on Spotify, where I was talking about cannabis products. I think I did maybe 1 or 2 short video clips about a psilocybin product that, I never made other videos because people didn't really seem to be gravitating towards them, so I just left it alone. Went and synced all those hundreds of episodes for multiple years. Now, these audio episodes were different content from the reviews that were videos. In my opinion, I feel like the reviews from the videos, I was literally smoking pot. I was literally eating the edibles. Like actively, like eating them and recording myself do it. And recording myself kind of with the effects of it and like talking about kind of what my experience was. Over and over, I did this multiple times. The podcast wasn't always that. It was more psychologically focused, emotion focused, kind of talking more about, how cannabis products kind of helps me emotionally process maybe this in this area or that area or whatever. That's mostly what it was. So I feel like the content that was video on YouTube, in my opinion, was maybe more provocative than the content on the podcast. But because I synced all the RSS feed, the minute it was all synced and uploaded, I don't know how many hundreds of episodes, I go back in and the whole YouTube channel was just deleted. YouTube's like, sorry, like restricted content or whatever. They said I was posting harmful content. Harmful to who? I don't think it was harmful to anybody. There are plenty of sites out there where people talk about cannabis, use cannabis. There's this one guy, Psych Ed Substance. He takes all kinds of substances. Now, I didn't do my due diligence and write on every single episode. This is for education purposes only, education and entertainment. I did write it on some of them, but not every single thing. But how come once I post my podcast content, my whole YouTube channel gets deleted? I had videos on there for like 4 or 5 years, maybe more. And the podcast episodes are on Spotify and they're doing just fine. So I just don't understand that style of censorship. Where it doesn't really make sense. Where it's like, I'm allowed to have content, but I'm not allowed to have content. But I'm allowed to have this content, but I'm not. But it's been up for years and nobody said a thing about it. And now all of a sudden it's like, just delete the whole channel. The only difference I made was uploading the stuff from the podcast. But the podcast information wasn't that provocative in my opinion. It's kind of the same stuff I post on here, not the same exact episodes. Some of them were the same episodes and some of them weren't. Most of them weren't, but there were some books that I was talking about where I'd posted on there. That was another thing. I remember posting content about a book, I think it was The Four Agreements, and I was going a few pages at a time, and I posted that on, I think, all of my podcasts. And on one of my podcasts, it got banned, and on all the other ones, it was fine. So it's stuff like that where it's like, what the heck is going on? Like, it's not equal. It's not equal for every channel. It's not equal for everything. And something gets triggered, where you can get banned or warned or get a strike or whatever it may be. But it's not fully clear to me. Like, I think a lot of times it's somebody else saying that you're posting harmful content, even if you're not. I don't think I was posting harmful content at all, I'll be honest. I was never telling people to take anything. I was just explaining my experiences with it If you don't want to take it, then don't take it. I was just explaining what it does to my brain and body. You know, I don't see how there's anything wrong with that. But also not allowing people to get any kind of information about cannabis products and stuff like that. I mean, when it comes to, I think a lot of people went through those DARE programs in school, at least at my age range. A lot of people's schools had DARE, which was, you know, some drug education program where it was like kind of harm reduction slash stay away. Like they were basically like, don't try drugs, but at least they gave you some information about it. But it's kind of like, it's almost like with sexual things, you know. Some schools teach abstinence only. Some schools teach, well, if you are going to do it, here's the education around it so that you know how to safely do it. I mean, people have their opinions about what's best for their household, but I feel like having no education and jumping into something that you don't know, you know, think about it. You know, if you know people who've ever had edibles, how do most people start with cannabis edibles? Most people start by taking way too much because they buy something that's 100 milligrams. They don't know how much 100 milligrams is, and it's a candy bar or a drink or, you know, a soda or a package of gummy bears or something. And people just think it's like I bought a Snickers bar. It's like I bought a, you know, pack of Skittles or a bag of Cheetos. You know, usually when you buy something like that, you eat it all. You know, if you buy something from the store, you're going to eat it all. So usually people don't think, oh, I can only take a little nibble of this if I'm going to microdose it. You know, 1 or 2 milligrams of that whole chocolate bar is like a third of a little square of it. But people don't know that. They're just like, oh, it's a chocolate bar, I'm going to eat it. And then they eat the whole dang thing. And then they're like, that was way too much. And then if they try it again, they're like, they learn. So usually I've noticed that with cannabis products in the recreational areas, people eat too much of it because they don't know. Even though it says it all over the packaging, they don't know. They're thinking, oh, it's a candy bar like a Snickers that I would get at like a gas station or a Ralph's or a grocery store or Costco or whatever. I'm just gonna eat one candy bar. You know, how often do you buy a soda and drink like 2 sips of it and put it in the fridge and take like a month to drink it? Usually that's not the thing. Usually when you buy a soda in a bottle, you're just gonna drink it. But if you buy a cannabis infused soda, it might have 100 milligrams of cannabis in there. Most people don't want or need 100 milligrams. Like, that's way too much for anybody. And so, at least in one sitting. And so, it's almost like, okay, so if you went to a CVS or like a pharmacy and you purchased melatonin in a container, right? And say each melatonin gumdrop or whatever is like 5 milligrams, you know at night you're going to take maybe 1 of those, right? I'm not giving any kind of medical advice or anything. I'm just saying, in theory, people see it as a medicine, so they're like, oh, I'm going to read it and take it as a medicine. They don't make, I mean, maybe they make, but I don't know if they make like a melatonin soda or a melatonin candy bar where you're going to be like, oh, I have to eat like 1 piece of this, 1 little nibble of a corner, not like eat the whole, you know, not eat the whole thing, because that's too much melatonin. Anybody who takes melatonin knows, you know, you're not going to take that much melatonin all at once. I don't know that many people who take more than 10 milligrams. You know, that's a lot, you know. Usually people say 5 milligrams or less. I'm not your doctor, so ask your doctor, but I mean, usually that's pretty standard, and they sell them in those doses, so people kind of know. But when it comes to cannabis products, people treat it like it's candy, you know, when it's edibles, because they don't know better and they're not taught. And there's a lot of information on the internet that's missing because it gets censored and taken down. And so people have like basically a psychedelic trip when they're trying it, and then they're like, that was too much. And if they do end up taking it later on for medicinal or helpful or recreational reasons, they dial way, 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 way back. Because you want to be functional. Like, you're not functional if you're eating like 100 milligrams of an edible. But when YouTube censors stuff like that, people don't get to learn. You know, they're not going to learn. They're not going to come across a video that's like, oh, like, don't take all of this whole thing. Because YouTube has decided, you know, they would rather have people in danger. They would rather have people not know the information. They'd rather take that abstinence and ignorance approach. I'm not saying ignorant as in stupid, but ignorant as in no knowledge, no education around the topic. They feel like it's better for you to have no information. I think that's dangerous for any topic, almost, to have zero information. I'm not saying everybody needs to firsthand experience everything, you know, because that can be dangerous too, but if you're going to experience something, you need to have the education around it with anything, you know. Now keep all these topics in mind, okay? Now, because I went off another like 20 minutes talking about that, so we know that YouTube censors and social media in general censors with race, censors with sexuality, with gender, with substances, with medical related topics and medicine related topics, right? That's like 6 topics or so, 5, 6 topics. And so people aren't really able to get information about those things and education about those things from one of the most powerful search engines out there. They are banning information. Now, let's talk about anti-Semitism. Sorry it took 47 minutes to get into, but I have to give all that background, because if I don't, I feel like people aren't going to know where I'm going with this. And they're going to assume that I'm saying to be racist against Jewish people, which I'm obviously not saying that. But people don't listen, you know, and after getting content banned, I feel like I need to say a lot of stuff versus saying less, because I don't want people to think I'm coming up with topics that have no backing. I'm talking about first-hand experience of my own stuff getting banned, of other people whose stuff I follow that might be similar content to mine, and how I realize, hey, I can't search this. Hey, I can't post this. Hey, I can't use that term. Now, there are different things with, like, is it, you know, something that children can access? I think parents, I said I wasn't going to talk about people of age under 18, so let me just not even talk about that. So let's talk about race and anti-Semitism. I want to talk about it from the perspective of movies a little bit first, just a little bit. I'm not gonna harp on this too much, but one of the first movies I saw Ryan Gosling in was this movie called The Believer. It's an indie film, very good movie. I don't want to spoil it. He basically would study, I think he was studying Talmud, or he was in a Hebrew school where he would study at least Torah if it wasn't Talmud. I'm talking about the movie. I don't know about his real life. He was basically raised Jewish, dad, sister, Jewish. The dad kind of maybe was a little bit challenging of, the Sabbath and things like that. He Ryan Gosling in this plays a character named Daniel or Danny, who is that what he's called? I might be mixing up another movie, sorry. I don't know if that's his name in this actually. But basically Ryan Gosling in this movie plays a neo-Nazi. Um, he plays a character of a neo-Nazi, very well-spoken guy who kind of comes in touch with some, I don't know if they're anti-Zionists, I don't know what they are. But this was like pre-smartphones era. And I think he's in New York. I think it's placed in New York. And, he's raised Jewish and somewhere along the line gets maybe kicked out of Hebrew school, maybe, I don't really know. It shows some like flashbacks to times where he's thinking about his youth and his religious practice as a youth. So it flashes back to these times. And while it flashes back to those times, it shows he's yeah, it flashes back to those times, and then um, he's basically it shows kind of like how he kind of gets to where he's at. It doesn't really fully show it, but a little bit. You kind of get an idea of how he was as a youth, how his family kind of is, how smart he is, what he spends his time doing. And he's kind of like with these other guys who are these neo-Nazis. I don't know if that's the right name. Neo-Nazi is the right name, but I want to say it is the right name. I don't know. Like a modern day anti-Semitic person, but he is Jewish. And he's kind of hiding in plain sight. And he has a lot of hatred against Jewish people, but he's also hiding his own Jewish identity. And he's with these other neo-Nazi people who hate Jewish people, but they can't really describe why they hate Jewish people. They just hate them for the sake of hatred. They don't have a reason. They don't know Jewish culture. They don't know anything about Judaism. Meanwhile, him, having been very much raised Jewish and being Jewish and connected with old Jewish friends and people, who he kind of knew, he's basically he basically is basing his hatred on first-hand experience versus these other people that he realizes he's like they seem like idiots. He can't really relate to them because they're just like blindly hating. Now, the reason why I mention this is because it's such a complex storyline. And I really like a complex storyline. So the reason why I'm mentioning it though is because you kind of see in this storyline that it doesn't really make a lot of sense, does it? It doesn't really make a lot of sense for a Jewish person to be hating Jewish people. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense for a person who knows zero about Jewish traditions and culture to be hating Jewish people. Now, what I've been noticing lately, and I'm not following this like very much, but what I've been noticing lately is that a lot of content is being taken down that's anti-Semitic. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not even going to answer that question. I'm just going to move forward with what I'm saying. You can answer that question for yourself. I don't think there's one universal answer. Where I'm from, where I live in the United States of America, we are supposed to have freedom of speech. But as I explained for a whole 47 minutes, we don't have freedom of speech on the internet. Not if you're certain racial groups, even certain language backgrounds, not if you're of certain, sexuality or gender identity backgrounds, and not if you're talking about medical types of topics. You're not able to post openly without trying to use different terms to kind of get around these algorithms that are banning things. We don't have freedom of speech. YouTube does not promote freedom of speech. A lot of platforms don't, but YouTube in particular, which is one of the most powerful search engines in the whole world, does not promote freedom of speech. It might seem like it does, but like I said at the very beginning, if you're a person who posts content and you know people who post content, you will know a lot of people who have had their stuff taken down. Copyright restrictions, all kinds of things. We don't have freedom on the internet. And is that a problem? Because how long do people spend on the internet every day? A lot of smartphones, track the time we spend online, right? And they say how long you've been on the internet for, right? Or whatever app. And how long do people spend on Netflix, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever, you name it. All those platforms and more. How long do they spend on there? Hours. It's very rare to come across someone who only has 1 hour of time online, 1 hour online a day. Most people have maybe 4 hours. Some people have 8 hours. I mean, I listen to stuff in the background a lot too, so it's like if I'm doing deliveries or doing some other thing, a lot of times I might not be actively glued to the screen. I might be multitasking, so it's technically screen time. I have it open. I've got other stuff I'm paying attention to in the background. So that's common too. But, people spend hours and hours online. More so most times than they spend in front of a book. More so most times than they spend in front of a notebook, writing, or reading, or just sitting with themselves. A lot of us are glued to our phones, and we're searching around, and we're being told what we're allowed to search and what the algorithm wants to recommend to us and feed to us. And there's certain information that it wants you to know and other information that it doesn't. Just pay attention. Just pay attention to it, Now, when it comes to racial topics and racism, I mean, anti-Semitism is bad. I'm not going to say that I promote it. I don't promote it. It's bad. But other types of racism is bad too. And these algorithms promote racism baked into them. They're already racist, right? They're not equal. They're not equal. Not everybody's being treated equally online just because of whatever category they're coming from, right? Even like I talked about those job applications, and if you talk about LinkedIn, if you talk about the faces of certain people with certain skin tones, you know, you're almost better off sometimes not putting a skin tone and not having video, so that your skin tone doesn't show, so that you don't get blocked in some way or another. There's already a lot of corruption baked in with these things. So why is it that people are allowed to be racist against any group that's not a Semitic group? And when we say anti-Semitism, I believe anti-Semitism does include some Arab groups too. And a lot of times when we say anti-Semitism, we mostly think about Jewish people, Jewish Semitic peoples. I still don't know why that is, because it's not the full picture. Because when we say anti-Semitic, it could be a lot of people fit into that category, but a lot of times it's focused on Judaism or Jewish people. Maybe not Judaism as a religion, but Jewish people, Jewish populations of people. Now, I'm not saying that I promote anti-Semitism, because I don't. But why is it that it's taken more seriously than other forms of racism? Why? Why is that? I can't post anti-Semitic content, but I can be racist against Asians or blacks or whatever groups openly on the internet. But I can't be anti-Semitic. And I'm not saying I want people to be racist. I'm not saying that at all. But it's not equal. How come it's not even? How come it's not equal? Why am I allowed to be racist against some groups openly, not get banned, not get, I'm not saying me in particular, because I hope that I don't post that kind of stuff, but why am I allowed to do that against some groups and not against other groups? Why? Why is the world allowed? I have some guesses why. And some of those are conspiracies that I don't think I want to go into. But I think, okay, another thing, I hate talking about, like, okay, watch this because it's about this racist thing. Because I think there are some people that will go out there and they'll use that to fuel their racism. As in, it makes their racism and their hatred stronger. Right? So, if you've seen the movie like American History X, it's basically white versus black for the most part. We'll call it that. White people versus black people, setting in Venice Beach, California for the most part. It's Edward Norton, the lady from, whoever that main actor is from The Craft, and Edward Norton has a guy playing his younger brother. So basically, Edward Norton is posting. Edward Norton create. Uh, he basically commits a racial hate crime and goes into prison where he's now, surrounded by a majority black population and has to try to fit in with the white people, but is he really fitting in with them? And he experiences a lot of racism and hatred in prison as a white person. I'm sorry, I'm talking slow because I'm trying to not spoil the whole movie, but watch it yourself if you want to. But that movie sheds a lot of light on, race topics. Now, why does he hate black people? He has a reason, I think, in his explanation during the movie of why he stopped hating black people. There was a reason behind it. So he starts hating black people, and he starts spreading that hatred towards his younger brother. Well, not against his younger brother, but his younger brother starts almost following in his footsteps. The mom is pretty concerned and worried about all this. And I think it all came from a place of grief. So I think that's a very important thing to realize, in both of these stories, in American History X and in The Believer. Some people become racist because of past traumas with certain people, certain groups and certain people. And other people, I don't think there's only two groups, but other people, I think, don't have firsthand experience, and it's out of fear of the unknown, because they don't know anybody from those groups and don't interact with them and don't socialize with them and don't talk to them, so they don't know anything, and they let other people, tell them their opinions about those groups, and then they develop a negative opinion based on secondhand information. That's pretty common too, I was raised in a household where people were, we have a majority black family. We do have white family members and mixed family members, but the majority of our family is black. So it wasn't uncommon for me to be around circles of people who were black in my family, often talking about, if you get married, you're going to marry a black person, and when you date, you're going to date black people. I grew up with those types of messages, the type of almost joking stereotype prejudice of if you can't share a comb, you shouldn't be dating, kind of thing. Kind of saying people use different hair products, so you might not want to use the same combs, if you put oil in your hair, but someone else is trying to wash natural oil out of their hair, it's you have a different hair texture and a different hair type, and things like that. Living in a place like LA, I don't really think that really is valid. But I can see how there could be some danger in interracial dating depending in the world where you live. So I'm not going to say it applies worldwide because there are places where you might get a lot of discrimination more so. Like, I don't think you would be denied a job. You might get denied some type of like, I'm thinking like church wise. There are racial kind of churches and stuff, and like you might be sticking out like a sore thumb and have a negative experience at a church. Like if you're a white person going into a black church, or you know, um, an American person going into like a Spanish speaking language church or a Japanese church or a Tongan church or like whatever it is, especially sometimes they'll have like a language separation with the churches, and that's fine. It's fine. I don't see anything wrong with people having their own, you know, ethnic groups. There's a Serbian Croatian Adventist church that I went to because I had a Serbian friend who went. It was called Yugoslavian, but it was before the conflict and the war in former Yugoslavia, where they split to Serbia, Croatia. I had a close friend that I grew up with whose dad was a pastor at an Adventist church in LA that was then called the Yugoslavian church, and he's Serbian. And I know that I have some other friends that are Croatian, and they had a lot of hatred against each other, and I never really understood that. But the church, I think the pastor was Serbian. I don't really know how much of the population was Croatian, but I knew quite a few friends my age that were millennial age whose parents were immigrants and were Serbian or Croatian. My friend himself was an immigrant, and so we went to his church. And I think at that time they had some people sleeping at the church because they had fled from the conflict and were still trying to get on their feet. So the church kind of supported them to stay there and stuff like that. So that was stuff that I was like, he kind of talked about it a little bit, that there was like bombings. And there was another friend of his I met named Slavic who was visiting from, I think, Serbia. He was visiting from Serbia, and he brought him to one of our Vespers one night, and he was kind of telling his story about how they used to try to spread religious material in Serbia and go door to door, and kind of they experienced, I don't know if it was negative racial experiences, or if it was just like prejudice against their religion. Because I know that whole area, Belarus, Russia, there's some areas in those regions, Ukraine, religion can be a little, it's not like here, how you can have Jehovah's Witnesses in LA coming to your door, or like Mormons coming to your door. Like it's more dangerous. I'm not saying it's not dangerous for them, but I would say my experience living in LA is pretty different because it's not popular to be racist here. It's not popular to be like uncultured and not know, different areas with like different ethnic foods and different ethnic things and different immigrant populations. Like you're kind of expected to kind of know a little bit more and be involved with more types of people for the most part. Like you're not expected to be racist. It's not encouraged out here. At least not from what I've seen. Overall, I'd say overall, if you're a teacher or a student or a boss or an employee, you're usually not going to be praised for sharing your racist ideas. Somebody's probably going to call you out on it or complain or pull you aside, or you'll just, unless you're being racist amongst your own types of people and like talking about outside groups with your own race, that's probably the only time you can really get away with it. Like, because there's so much diversity out here, it's really not popular to be racist, and so I just don't know how that really pans out. But yeah, it's really not popular to be racist. I'm not saying people are never racist, but it's just not popular. Um, so, so yeah, like I don't know, like when it comes to anti-Semitism, I do notice that you know I think let me see, how do I word this? I think what I notice of why people are prejudiced, not the only reason why, but something I notice, Jewish people as a whole, not every single Jewish person, but if I'm just generalizing here, the Jewish culture in the US oftentimes is seen as financially successful, educationally successful, business wise successful, but also tribal. So there is the message that people get, to marry within your own race so that you'll have Jewish kids. I know a lot of people that aren't maybe Torah observant Jews or aren't, they don't really practice, but they were bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah and went to Hebrew school and learned, biblical Hebrew enough to like read, write, practice. They do have their religious practices. They, yeah, they have their own religious practices. Celebrating of like holy days and commemorative days like Rosh Hashanah and Hanukkah. Like I can't tell you how many non Torah observant Jewish friends I have that keep the holy days, that were bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah. That's not uncommon to have people that are still tribally connected and may have been taught that maybe they're expected to marry another Jewish person, even if they don't marry a Jewish person. But they're kind of taught that message of like, we want Jewish offspring and Jewish lineage. And I guess if you have a Jewish mother, you're technically Jewish. So maybe there's not as much pressure on the females. I don't really know. I've never really asked my Jewish friends about that. But it's just interesting because I feel like other races in the US, other groups in the US, don't have that as much. And if they do, they're still maybe considered marginalized on a financial or educational side, or maybe religious side. Like Judaism is considered a mainstream religion, even though there's not like a massive Jewish population in the U.S. It's still, considered a big population. I mean, sorry, it's considered a pretty influential population. If you look at like black groups, Latino groups, some certain Asian groups, they might be more marginalized. Maybe not stereotypically living in areas where it's very safe, or the education system is good, or the economy is good. Kind of ghettoized, basically, with systemic oppression. I I don't know. Do Jewish populations experience that same systemic oppression? That I don't know, because I feel like, and this might just be an opinion, I don't have any data to back this up or research to back this up, but I feel like if on the surface, a lot of times in the US, Jewish people are Caucasian looking, they look white, they're white passing. Unless they say they're Jewish, people don't know that they're Jewish. Now, when you're black, oftentimes people know you're black. When you're Asian, oftentimes people know. If you're Latino, oftentimes people know. If you're Indian, from India, oftentimes people know. Like, I'm not saying 100% people will know, or 100% of the time people are able to identify just by looking, because that's not accurate. I mean, there are Asian Jews, there are black Jews, there are all kinds of Jews. So but I think one thing that's maybe unique is that if you look white, you still also get a privilege that other groups don't really get. You don't get that foot in the door so easily. But also baked into a culture of high literate rates, high rates of business ownership, entrepreneurship. You're kind of at an advantage. And if you come from a family that knows how to be successful, and you're never given the message that you're dumb or can't do anything. I mean, I'm black. I literally, until a certain age, I literally thought that black people were not, biologically, just weren't as smart. That's what I saw. That's what I saw. That's what I was exposed to. I was exposed to, like, hip hop videos of, like, people talking about killing, and the way people spoke. It was maybe hard to understand their English and the profanity and just the stuff that they seemed like they might have been doing on the media. It was never like positive stuff. It wasn't till later on in life, I don't remember when, but I remember somebody told me that, or I just realized it wasn't true. But imagine that, you grow up thinking, oh, I'm just not doing good in school because I'm black. Not because of a racist teacher, or not because of just because I'm just biologically not able to get this. Oh, it's hard. If it's hard for me, I can't get it. Like, and I don't think anybody told me this verbally, but it was just a message I got through the media. From being raised around watching TV and music videos and stuff, I was influenced by that enough that I didn't think outside of it for a while in my childhood. I was like, wow, I'm not going to be as smart as these, like, when these teachers are talking about these lessons of going to college and all this stuff. It's like, I don't see college professors that are black. When I walk around the colleges, I don't see black people. Back then I didn't. And I just assumed, like, okay, all the people I see who are in positions of power, who seem to have money around me, and I wasn't raised in a black neighborhood, I just assumed, people who were black just weren't as good at stuff. Now, and this is coming from a black person. Now, I don't think Jewish people get that message. I don't think, they look at the cultural surroundings and think, oh, I can't do this. I mean, think of a rite of passage of a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. You're learning a whole language, how to read, write, speak in a whole language. You're learning a whole Torah portion. You're memorizing it. You're speaking in front of a congregation of people. I mean, a lot of, cultures, at least in the Western world, don't have rites of passages like that unless you count like your sweet 16 or graduating high school or something like that, or getting a driver's license. Those are kind of like the only like major ones. But yeah, think about it. Think about it. It's not the same, right? It's not the same thing. And it's pretty sad to say. It's pretty sad. You know, um, people don't want to challenge this stuff. It's difficult to challenge, you know, about why. Like, why does systemic oppression exist? There's this episode that Lex Friedman did in an interview with Kanye West while I think Kanye West was ill. He should not have been interviewed at that time. He was spouting all kinds of stuff. And I think potentially, I don't know, but I think he was maybe in a manic state of some form. Or maybe his symptoms were not managed. It did not appear that he was managed. He was not doing well. So I don't think it was fair to interview him at that time. I think he should not have been interviewed. But he was spouting a bunch of racist and anti-Semitic ideas in that episode. And one of Lex Friedman's latest videos was an interview with Donald Trump. So it just goes to show, you know, the variety of people he has on. I was pretty disappointed in Lex Friedman for having Kanye West on when he was in that state of mind. It didn't make him look good. It didn't make black people look good. I would consider it a form of, you know, slander. I don't know why that video wasn't taken down. But Kanye West was spouting all kinds of anti-Semitic ideas. But I guess a question I have, is it anti-Semitic when the statistics are behind it? Maybe the ideas of like how it's interpreted make it anti-Semitic. But when you look at the record industry, it's not uncommon to have, you know, Jewish people in those businesses running things. It's not uncommon to have Jewish business owners. You know, people talk about this all the time. The Forbes, is it Forbes or Fortune 500? What is it? Like Forbes magazine or whatever, who has like the top people, a lot, like a very high percentage, I think in the 80 or 90% range, are Jewish people who are getting recognized. Now, what is it that they're doing that other people aren't doing? I've just listed a whole bunch of things that are positive things that, you know, yeah, and I've seen, you know, most of my Jewish friends do very well. I don't think I've had any Jewish friends that maybe don't have family support or that weren't doing well in school or that weren't doing well at work. I'm trying to think if I've ever come across that as an experience with those friends. I haven't. They've always done well. Now, maybe their parents and family recognize if their kid isn't doing well, what are the steps they can take to help that? Is there tutoring? Is there some other kind of, you know, do they need to get tested and see kind of what areas need more support? Do they need, like, maybe the parents are able to identify. And after I've studied psychology and learning disabilities and all this other kind of stuff, I recognize it now. All the stuff that I never recognized, either about myself or even other friends or people I grew up around. Not in a judgmental way, but just observing when I look back and reflect, I'm like, yeah, I knew a lot of people who maybe if they had this different or that different, they probably would have done better. But I didn't really see that with my Jewish friends, but it's not the most massive sample size either. But I think there is something to the discipline, to the culture, to the traditions. Even if they're not Torah observant, they still have those traditions. They still have those rites of passage that kind of they can look back on and be like, I did that really hard thing. Like, until I got really involved in like techie interests and music software and all kinds of stuff, and started realizing that when other people would doubt me and say, oh, you can't do that, it's too hard, I was pretty confident and I was able to kind of just do it. Once I realized that, I was like, oh, I'm actually very intelligent and very smart. And I have an interest in learning things that interest me. I'm very good with languages. Musically, I'm good at writing music. As far as practicing and remembering it and stuff like that, that comes a little bit slower to me. But I'm not bad with it. I'm not like terrible with music. I'm pretty skilled with music. But yeah, like when I go and think about, you know, the types of stuff that come up, it's like, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing all the time, you know? I look at people who are spouting all kinds of things about Judaism. Now, there is a systemic oppression that does happen for certain minority groups. Now, I'm wondering if there's a systemic uplifting for people who are of Jewish background. I have no proof of this. I'm wondering, because there's also networking. People hire their own. There's a lot of, what was that book? Was it by Rabbi Daniel Lapin? It might have been a book by Rabbi Daniel Lapin. It's a really good book. And it's about, like, why Jewish populations have been so successful. And some of the things I mentioned were already there, but I think in that book there was some part where he talked about networking. I mean, think about it. If you're involved in a congregation and socialized in a Hebrew school and all these different places, I mean, people who grew up in church, you kind of know what this is like. If you grew up in church or any other kind of niche group setting where you're interacting one or more times per week with people, with a lot of people, you have a network of people, and if you're in a network of people who traditionally and culturally are already doing well, because one thing that Judaism promotes is charity. Another thing I've noticed about Judaism is you're usually forced to participate in things that might pressure you to spend money. And if you're, this is a stereotype, I would say, about having a lot of kids, but if you're going to have a lot of kids, you need money to do that. And if you already know how to study and you already know how to make money, and you already have a network of people and you already know how to read, and you already know you're around people who know a lot about banking and finance. I mean, how many other cultures have all that in combination? On top of, at least in the US, the face of Judaism in the U.S. is usually white race look on the surface. Now, I know that's not accurate, but typically in the US, that's kind of common to have white people who are Jewish. Jewish heritage is very diverse. I want to keep saying that. But usually in the US, if you look at New York, that has a large population of Jews. A lot of people left from Europe to settle in certain places. So they're European, a lot of European background Jews. And so if you do have that like white passing privilege, there's a lot of other stuff that people don't have to put up with. And unless you have like a stereotypical like Jewish name, people might not assume you're Jewish. And with anti-Semitism, I know, like, even if people are just making comments, one thing that's kind of interesting that I find is that unlike some races where people might not be so open to say it to your face, like, as a black person, if someone wants to be racist outwardly to me, they obviously can because I'm right there, and if they hate black people and they want to say it, they can say it. Or they might say it. I'm not saying I want them to, but they might. But if I wasn't a black person, if I was a white person, and if I was a Jewish white person, I could imagine, I don't know because I'm not a Jewish white person, but I could imagine that it's not uncommon for Jewish white people to be in settings with other white people or other people who don't know that they're Jewish, and other people making anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic remarks about Judaism, and especially with all the conflicts going on currently, where there are Jewish populations involved and Semitic peoples involved. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of Jewish people that are being exposed to a lot of hateful ideas without people knowing that those people themselves are Jewish. They might just think, oh, I can say, like, they might be around people that just think, oh, I can say whatever racial thing or racist thing I want to say, without thinking, oh, like, that person's Jewish. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, if somebody wants to kind of hide their racism or hide their kind of like negative remarks against like a Latino person or an Asian person or a black person or whatever, it might be a little harder because they might look and they might be like, oh, that person's black, so I don't want to say this in front of an obviously black person. But it's kind of hard to say who's obviously Jewish. Like, unless you're wearing a yarmulke or dressed in a certain garb, people might not assume that you're Jewish. And you could be any race and Jewish, And so I think that's another thing that might be happening, is that people are overhearing all these anti-Semitic remarks and they are Jewish, but people don't think that that specific person is Jewish, so they're comfortable saying all that stuff around them. People are comfortable saying anti-Semitic remarks around me, and I have a love for Jewish culture. I kind of like studying different cultures and taking what I've seen them succeed in, and I think the discipline as well as the discipline and the I don't know. yeah, there's discipline and there's um, just yeah, those networks and things, and a lot of the stuff that is talked about in Rabbi Daniel Lapin's book kind of leads to show kind of like how the uniqueness is of Jewish populations, but um, I think there's also jealousy, though. I think a lot of anti-Semitism comes from jealousy. I think a lot of it comes from people looking and seeing some group that's doing well, and maybe even so that in the U.S. because the face of the people are white looking, the people that you usually see are usually going to be white if they're on the news or wherever. Now in Israel, that's not the same thing. The face of Judaism in Israel isn't a Caucasian European face. There's usually darker skin tones. There's a lot more different look than the typical American looking Jewish person. Now there is diversity. I'm being so general here, okay? So there's so much diversity even in the US, but I'm just saying, like, if somebody were to give you a sheet of paper and say, draw a Jewish person, you're likely not going to draw like an Asian person. You're probably not going to put those features. Maybe, but maybe not. So I think there's a lot of fear and jealousy. And it's hard when the economy is bad and people aren't doing well financially to look and see, oh, there's this group of people that seems to be flourishing, And instead of asking why and studying why those people are getting to those places, people would rather, create a conspiracy and spread hate instead of like studying the people and studying why they're that way and what it is that's going on and trying to observe and see what it is, like what are they doing? What are they doing that my community isn't doing? Now, a lot of my family is African. So Africans in the US have a different kind of mentality when it comes to, I'd say overall, compared to like African American black people. Now, I'm not saying that African Americans don't want their kids to be educated. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that they don't want their kids to be doctors or dentists or nurses or lawyers or whatever. I'm not saying that. But if you know a lot of Africans, you know how the parents are. They're very similar to Asian parents where they are like get good grades. It's not very common that you see black African families that don't push hardcore for education, that don't push their kids to get good grades, that don't push their kids to aim high, that don't push their kids to get into colleges and go to universities and get a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD or some kind of doctorate or an MD or a law degree. It's very, very common that people want their kids to do these things. It's very, very common. And yeah, it's actually so common. It's actually so common that Um, I don't know. It's just so common. Like I don't see that so much with African American groups. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist amongst African Americans, but Black African immigrants have a different mentality. It's just a cultural mentality that education and, you know, job status is definitely important. No, I'm not saying I don't know any, because I don't really know any African American people. I mean, Americans, American Black African Americans that don't want their kids to have a good education, you know, but they're not. I don't know. I know African kids that get beat over bad grades. I don't know if I've heard that as like a standard for like African Americans. I'm not saying it's positive, but and also just a strict household. There's definitely, corporal punishment. That's not uncommon in African households. Do I agree with it? Not necessarily, but it's very common. I mean, if you look it up, look up a lot of like the beef that African kids have against their African parents, especially when they've moved into Western countries. It's like you've kind of got this dual culture of your household is this African household where you look around and the expectations that your friends' parents have for them are not the same expectations that your African parents have. They're very strict. African parents as a whole tend to be very strict, almost to the point that it's excessive and crazy, and the punishment, I would say, often doesn't meet the bad deeds. The punishments, I feel like, are often more extreme than what you did wrong. So if you get in trouble at school, instead of getting grounded like a little bit, you'll get like severely punished for like making small mistakes. So you learn at a very young age you do not make mistakes, even small ones, and especially when it's socially small mistakes at school or with other, like if you go over to your friend's house or whatever, they better not say anything negative about you at what you did at their house at dinner or at a sleepover. You get in trouble at their house, you're in big, 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 big trouble. You know, um, and I don't know, but I'm just saying we can talk about different races in general. I mean, it's hard to really talk about racial groups without generalizing. You kind of have to generalize first, and then you narrow down into like subcultural details. I always loved studying anthropology, studying different cultural groups, and it was, I remember taking Asian American studies, African American studies, Latin American studies. I mean, some of it is maybe biased too, depending who's writing the material, but it is a lot more eye-opening than, you know, the history textbooks you get. It is important to kind of go into those cultural textbooks and kind of look more deeply into the cultures. Now, I'm wondering if there's a Jewish studies class. That would be interesting. But if there is one, I'll try and post it if I find something like that, because I think that might be important for people to consider. And then checking out the movies I mentioned, I mean, both of them are pretty intense. And that Lex Friedman interview, kind of intense. All three of those do have like anti-Semitic ideas in them. And again, I'm not promoting anti-Semitism. I'm just talking about it as a topic. And in theory, you know, why does it come up? Where does it come from? Why do we notice it? Why does it exist? And is it accurate? You guys can determine that for yourselves and challenge yourselves on either end. But I don't really think it's I think it's an interesting type of racism and systemic oppression when we start looking at Jewish cultures. It just is just very different than the way a lot of other groups experience prejudice. Because it's kind of weird when people hate on groups of people that are stereotypically doing well. That's kind of an interesting thing to see. But, alright, it's late. I gotta go get lunch, or eat lunch, heat up some food. I hope this was interesting. I've recorded a lot today. This is gonna go up at midnight. I might keep on this topic. I might rewatch some of those movies that I just said, and that Lex Friedman interview with Kanye West. And I'm scared, guys. I almost don't know. Am I even allowed to post links? Because I have a feeling it's gonna like get my podcast banned or something. But anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for listening.